Jaya Sadguru Bhagavan. Jaya Sadguru Jaya Sadguru Bhagavan, Jaya Muktananda Mahan, Jaya Sadguru Bhagavan, Muktananda Mahan. Parvati Pate Hara 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 Mahadev. Namo Swanantaya Sahasramurtaye Sahasraparat Shishirodubhave Sahasranamne Purushaya Shashvate Sahasrakoti Yugadarine Namah. Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Sachidanandamurtaye Nishpapanchaya Shantaya Niralambaya Tejase Nityanandaya Gurave Shishya Samsara Harine Bhaktakaye Kadeyaya Namaste Chitsadatmane. Om Sana Vavatu Sano Bhunaktu Saviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Varitamastu Avidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Namo Gurubhyo Gurupadukabhyo Namah Parebhya Harapadukabhya Acharya Siddhesh Varapadukabhyo Namo Namah Shri Gurupadukabhya Enkara Rimkara Rahasya Yukta Shrimkara Gurar Tamavibhutya Omkara Marma Pratiparinebhyam Namo Namah Shri Gurupadukabhyam Hotragnihotra Niyavishotru Homari Sarva Prithiva Samanam Yad Brahma Tattva Ravitarinebhyam Namo Namah Shri Gurupadukabhyam Tamari Sarpa Rajagarudabhyam Viveka Vaira Yaniri Pradabhyam Bora Pradabhyam Kritamokshadabhyam Namo Namah Shri Gurupadukabhyam Ananta Samsara Samudratara Naukaitabhyam Sirabhaktidabhyam Tadyabdi Samsho Shanavaravabhyam Namo Namah Shri Gurupadukabhyam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Asya Shri Guru Gita Stotra Mantrasya Bhagavan Sada Shivarushi Nana Vidani Chandamsi Shri Guru Param Paramatma Devata Ambijam Sa Shakti Kram Kilakam Shri Guru Prasara Siddhyarthe Jape Viniyoga Ata Dhyanam Hamsavyam Parivrita Patra Kamale Divir Jagakarane Vishvokirnamane Kade Anilaye Swachandamam Nechaya Tadyotam Parashambhavam Tu Charanam Deepankura Grahinam Pratyakshakshara Vigraham Guruparam Yaye Vibhum Shashvatam Mama Chaturvira Purushartha Siddhyarthe Jape Viniyoga Sutta Uvacha Kailasa Shikare Ramye Bhakti Sandhana Nayakam Pranamya Parvati Bhaktya Shankaram Paya Pruchati Shri Devi Uvacha Om Namo Deva Devesha Parapara Jagadguru Sadashiva Mahadeva Guru Riksham Vardeme Kena Margena Goswami Dei Brahmamayo Bhave Tvam Kripam Kurume Swami Namami Charanotava Ishvara Uvacha Amarupasi Devi Tvam Tvaprityartam Vadamyaham Lokopakaraka Prashna Nakenapi Pratapura Durlabam Krishna Lokeshu Tatturashvavadamyam Guru Veda Brahmananyat Satyam Satyam Varanane Veda Shastra Puranani Itihasadikhani Cha Apa Sheva Shakta Gamadini Anyane Vivirani Cha Apabramsha Karani Jivanam Brantate Chasan Yagno Vratam Tapodanam Japasritam Tajevacha Guru Tavam Vignaya Muraste Charate Jana Guru Pudyam Marananyat Satyam Satyam Na Samshayaha Kalavartam Prayanastu Kartavyo Manishibi Pura Vidya Jaganmaya Decha Jnana Sambhava Udayo Ya Prakashena Guru Shabdena Katyate Sarva Papa Vishuddhama Shri Guru Parasevana Dei Brahma Bhaveryasman Chakrapartam Vadami Te Guru Param Bhujam Smirtva Jalam Shirasi Daraye Sarva Tirtha Vagasya Samprabnoti Phalam Nara Kosharam Apangasya Deeparam Yana Tejasam Guru Pararakam Samya Samsaranavatarakam Ajnanamudaharanam Chammakarmani Varanam Jnana Vairagya Siddhyartham Guru Pararakam Dive Guru Pararakam Vidva Guru Ruchista Bhojanam Guru Murte Saradhyanam Guru Mantram Sarajape Kashi Shesham Tanivaso Janavi Charanorakam Guru Vishveshwara Sakshat Tarakam Brahmanishitam Guru Parorakam Yatu Gaya Sok Soksha Gurumurtye Namo Namah. Gurumurtim Smare Nityam Guru Namasara Jape Prakurvita Guru Ranyana Bhavaye Guru Vatra Sitam Brahma Prapyate Taprasadata Guru Vyanam Sarakuryat Tulasvi Swapatiriyata Swashamam Cha Swajantim Cha Sarkirti Pushti Vardhanam Etat Sarvam Pardityaja Guru Ranyana Bhavaye Ananyashrintayanto Mam Sulavam Paramam Param Tasmat Sarva Prayanena Guru Radhanam Guru Shri Lokes Bhaktavataro Devadya Surapannagam Guru Bhaktra Sita Vidya Guru Bhaktya Chulavyate Karasma Karascha Prukarastejo Chate Ajnanagrasakam Brahma Gurevana Samshaya Dukkara Pratamo Varno Mayadi Guru Bhasaka Dukkara Dityo Brahma Maya Branti Vinashanam Evam Guru Param Shrestha Devanam Akpi Durlabham Ahu Ganeshcheva Gandaresha Prapujyate Dhruvam Tesham Cha Sarvesham Nasti Tadvam Guru Param Asanam Shayanam Vastram Dushanam Vanarikam Sadhakena Pradatavyam Guru Santoshakarakam Guru Radhanam Karyam Svajivitvam Nivedaye Nityamaradhaye Gurum Dirgarandam Namaskritya Nilajo Guru Saniram Hariramendriyam Ranan Sadguru Vyonivedaye Amadararikam Sarvam Sadguru Vyonivedaye Mikita Basma Vista Durgani Malamutrakam Seshwaraktam Chuchamam Sam Vanchayena Varaname Samsara Vrukshamaruda Pantanto Narakarnave Yena Cheva Drata Sarve Asme Shri Gurave Namah Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Eva Para Brahma Asme Shri Gurave Namah Etave Jagatameva Samsaranavasetave Prabhave Sarva Vidyanam Shambhave Gurave Namah Ajnanate Mirandasya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasme Shri Gurave Namah Tvam Pita Tvam Chame Mata Tvam Badhu Tvam Charevata Samsara Pratibhorartam Tasme Shri Gurave Namah Yat Satyena Jagat Satyam Ya Prakashena Bhatita Yaranandena Nandanti Tasme Shri Gurave Namah Yasya Sitya Satyamidam Yavati Vanarupata Priyam Putrari Akritya Tasme Shri Gurave Namah Ena Chetayate Idam Chittam Chetayate Nayam Shapyari Tasme Shri Gurave Namah Yasya Dhyana Rira Vishwam Nadrisham Bina Bherata रूपाय तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। यस्य मातं तस्य वाचां मातं यस्यानवेरसा अनन्या भावाय तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। अस्य कारणरूपस्य कार्यरूपेण भात्या कार्यकारणरूपाय तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। नानारूपमिदं सर्वं न केनाप्यस्ति भिन्नता कार्यकारणता चैव तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। यदङ्घ्रिकमलद्वन्द्वं वन्वतः पाणिभारकम् वरपाभ्यां श्रीगुरुं प्रणमाम्यहम्। शिवे कृते गुरुश्राता गुरुकृते शिवो नहि तस्मात् सर्वप्रयत्नेन श्रीगुरुं शरणं व्रजे। वन्दे गुरुपरद्वन्द्वं मम मनश्चित्तगोचरं श्वेतरक्तप्रभाविनां शिवशक्त्यमकम्भरम्। दुःकरं च गुणातीतं रूपकरं रूपवर्जितं गुणातीतस्वरूपं च यो दद्यात् स गुरुस्मृता। त्रिनेत्र सर्वसाक्षी अचतुर्बाहुरच्युतम् अचतुर्वदनो ब्रह्मा श्रीगुरुकथितप्रिये। निर्बाधो दायसगारवृद्धये यदनुव्रतो जन्तु चित्रसंसारमुक्तिभाग्। श्रीगुरो परमं रूपं विवेकचक्षुषोऽमृतं मन्दभाग्यान् पश्यन्ति मन्दसूर्योदयं यथा। श्रीनाथाचरणद्वन्द्वं यस्य दिशि विराजते तस्यै दिशे नमस्कुर्यात् भक्त्या प्रतिदिनं प्रिये। तस्यै दिशे सततमञ्जलिश आर्ये प्रक्षिप्यते मुखरितो मरुपेर्बुधे नित्यसाक्षी। श्रीनाथहरि गुरुत्रयं गणपतिं पितत्रयं भैरवां सिद्धौकं बतुकत्रयं वरयुगां धृतिक्रमं मण्डलाम्। वीरान्द्रश्चतुष्टशास्त्रिनवकं वीरवलि पञ्चकं श्रीमामालिनि मन्त्रराजसहितं वन्दे गुरुमण्डलम्। दीर्घमनिले यारि प्रदुष्करे नानायामशतैरनेककरणे दुःखात्मके दुर्जये। यस्मिन्नाविरिते विनाशति बले वायुस्वयं रक्षणात् प्राप्तुं तत्सहजं स्वभावमनिशां सेवादमे तं गुरुम्। सदेशिकसेवा शरीरचिन्तनं भवेदनतस्य शिवस्य चिन्तनं स्वदेशिकसेवा च नामकीर्तनं भवेदनतस्य शिवस्य कीर्तनं। यः पररेणुकणिका कापि संसारभारिते सेतुबन्धायते नाथं देशिकं तमुपास्महे। यस्मादनुग्रहं लब्ध्वा आहारध्यानमुत्सृजे तस्मै श्रीदेशिकेन्द्राय नमश्चाभीष्टसिद्धये। पारब्जं सर्वसंसार नाशकं ब्रह्मरन्ध्रे सितं भुजा मध्यस्थं चन्द्रमण्डले। अकतारितिरेकाब्जे सहस्रजालमण्डले लीलानिगमदृष्टि सम्परं व्यर्थदृष्टि परिमर्ष्टिस् तत्परटेकदृष्टि भावगुण परमेष्टिर् मोक्षमार्गैकदृष्टि सकल भुवनरङ्ग स्थापन सम्मयस्ति सकरुणरसवृष्टिस् तद्वमाला समष्टि सकल समय सृष्टि सच्चिदानन्ददृष्टि निवसतु मयि नित्यं श्रीगुरोरिव्यदृष्टि अग्निशुद्धसमं चाचु ज्वालपरीक्षकार्या मन्त्रराजामिमं मन्ये अर्णिसम्पातं मृत्यु च हरे जति तने जति तत्तुरे तत्समीपके वस्य सर्वस्य भायथा अजोऽहमजरोऽहं च अनदीनिधना स्वयम् अविकारश्चिरानन्द अनियन्मतो महान् अपूर्वाणां परं नित्यं स्वयं ज्योतिर्निरामयं वीरजं परमाकाशं ध्रुवमानन्दमव्ययम् श्रुतिप्रत्यक्षमेतेया मानुमानश्चतुष्टयम् यस्य च तपो वेद देशिकं च सरस्मरे अनन्यभवं कार्यं तवरमिमामते सारुत्वं च मया दृष्ट्वा वैतिष्ठति सम्प्रताम् अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्यक्तमेन चराचरं तत्परं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः सर्वशुद्धिशिरोरत्नं निराजिता परम्बुजा सूर्यो यस्तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः यस्य स्मरणमन्त्रेण ज्ञानमुत्पाद्यते स्वयं य एव सर्वसम्प्राप्तिस् तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः चैतन्यं शाश्वतं शान्तं व्योमतीतं निरञ्जनं ज्ञानबिन्दुकलातीतं तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः स्थावरं जगमं चैव तथा चैवाचराचरं व्यक्तं येन जगत्सर्वं तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः ज्ञानशक्तिसमारुद्धस् तद्वमलाविभूषितः मुक्तिप्रदातायस् तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः अनेकजन्मसम्प्राप्ता सर्वकर्मविदायिने स्वात्मज्ञानप्रभावेन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः न गुरोररिकं तत्त्वं न गुरोररिकं तपः तत्त्वं ज्ञानपरं नास्ति तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः मनोतात्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः ज्ञानमूलं गुरुमूर्ते पूजमूलं गुरुपरं मन्त्रमूलं गुरुवाक्यं मोक्षमूलं गुरुकृपा गुरुरादिरनादिश्च गुरुपरं देवतां गुरुपरतरं नास्ति तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः सप्तसागरपर्यन्तं तीर्थस्नानादिकं फलं गुरुरङ्घ्रिपयो बिन्दु सहसंशयेन दुर्लभम् गुरुरुष्टे गुरुशाता गुरुरुष्टेन कश्चन तस्मात् सर्वप्रयत्ने Vishnu Shivapakam Guru Parataram Nasti Tasmat Sampujayet Gurum Jnana Vijnana Saitam Labhyate Guru Bhaktita Guru Parataram Nasti Yeyo So Guru Margivim Tasmat Parataram Nasti Neti Neti Niveshrutim Manasa Vacha Sacheva Nityamaradaet Gurum Guru Kripa Prasadena Brahma Vishnu Sarashiva Samartha Prabhavadocha Kevalam Guru Sevaya Deva Kinnara Gandharva Hitaro Yaksha Charana Munayo Pina Jananti Guru Shushushane Vidim Mahankara Garbela Apavidya Balanvita Samsara Kuaravarte Gatta Yantre Yatagata Namukta Deva Gandharva Hitaro Yaksha Kinnara Ushaya Sarva Siddhascha Guru Seva Param Param Nityam Bhukti Mukti Vidayakam Srimad Parabrahma Gurum Smarami Srimad Parabrahma Gurum Varami Srimad Parabrahma Gurum Namami Srimad Parabrahma Gurum Vajami Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Vanvachitam Gagana Sadrisham Tadvamasyadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavachitam Shigunaraitam Sadgurum Tam Namami Nityam Shuram Nirabhasam Nirakaram Niranjanam Nityapuram Shiranandam Guru Brahma Namamyam Udambuje Karnikam Arya Samste Ala Prakasham Chipustaka Vishtavaram Dharanam Shvetambaram Shveta Vilepa Pushpam Mukta Vibhusha Muritam Dvinetram Vama Kapitya Sitya Divya Shakti Mandasmitam Sangrata Paniranam Anandam Anandakaram Prasanam Jnana Swarupam Nichabora Yuktam Yogindra Midyam Bhavaroga Vaidyam Srimad Gurum Nityamaham Namami Asmi Sisi Itiruamsa Nigra Nugra Makam Vrindyam Panchaviram Shashvat Asate Tam Namamyam Prakta Shirasi Suklabje Vinitvam Dvibhujam Gurum Karabhayayitam Shantam Haritam Nama Purvakam Nagarorarikam 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 Shiva Shasanata Shiva Shasanata Shiva Shasanata Shiva Shasanata Tirameva Shivam Trirameva Shivam Tirameva Shivam Trirameva Shivam Mama Shasanato Mama Shasanato Mama Shasanato Mama Shasanata Evam Viram Gurum Yatma Jnanamuparyate Swayam Tat Sadguru Prasadena Muktamiti Bhavaye Guru Narshita Margena Manashuddhim Tukaraye Anityam Kandaye Sarvam Yakin Chindam Gocharam मुच्यते ज्ञानमे समं कुर्यान् अन्यपन्था द्वितीयका एवं श्रुत्वा महादेवी गुरुनिन्दं करोति सायते नरकं घोरं यावच्चन्द्रदिवाकरो यावकल्पं च कोदेहास्तावदेव गुरुं स्मरेत् गुरुतोपन कर्तव्या स्वच्छन्दो यदि भवेत् ओंकारेण न वक्तव्यं प्रज्ञेशीशेकतञ्चना गुरुराग्रेण वक्तव्यम् असत्यं च कराचना यं कृत्य गुरुं निर्जित्य वारचा अरण्ये दले देशे सा भवेत् ब्रह्मराक्षसा मुनिभिपानगिर्वापि सुरवशापितो यरि कालमृत्युभयाद्वापि गुरुरक्षति पार्वती अशक्ता हि सुरद्याश्च अशक्तमुनयस्तथा गुरुशापेन ते शीघ्रं क्षाययन्ति न संशया मन्त्रराजमिरं देवी गुरुरित्याक्षरद्वयं स्मृतिवेदार्थवाक्येन गुरु साक्षात् परम्पराम् इति स्मृति अविज्ञाय केवलं गुरुसेवका एवे सन्न्यासिना प्रोक्ता इतरे वेषधारिणा नित्यं ब्रह्म निराकारं निर्गुणं बोधये परम् राभासां दीपो दीपान्तरं यथा गुरो कृपा प्रसादेन अहं निरीक्षये अनेन गुरुमार्गेण स्वात्मज्ञानं प्रवर्तते ब्रह्मस्तवपर्यन्तं पारमात्मस्वरूपकं स्थावरं जगमं चैव प्रणमामि जगन्मयं वन्देऽहं सच्चिदानन्दं वेरतीतं सद्गुरुं नित्यं पूर्णं निराकारं निर्गुणं स्वात्मसंस्थितं परतरं ध्येयं नित्यमानन्दकारकं हृदयाकाशमध्यस्थं सुधास्फटिकसानिभं स्फटिका प्रतिमारूपं दृश्यते दर्पणे यथा परम् आनन्दं सौमित्युताम् अङ्गुष्ठमन्त्रपुरुषं ध्यायतस्यमयं हृदि तत्र स्फुरति भावो यत् शृणुतं कथयं यम् अगोचरं च चागम्यं नामरूपविवर्जितं निश्चलं च विजानीयात् स्वभवं ब्रह्म पार्वती यथा गन्धस्वभावेन कर्पूरकुसुमारिषु शीतोष्णारि स्वभावेन तथा ब्रह्मा च शाश्वतम् स्वयं तत्त्वविदो भूत्वा सत्तव्यं यत्र कुत्रचित् इत्थब्रह्मारवतात्र ज्ञानं भवति तादृशम् गुरुज्ञानं च कृत्वा स्वयं ब्रह्ममयो भवेत् पिण्डे काले तथा रूपे मुक्तो सो नात्र संशयः श्रीपार्वती उवाच पिण्डं किं च महादेव परं किं समुदारताम् रूपतीतं च रूपं किम् एतदत्यायि शङ्करा श्रीमहादेव उवाच पिण्डं कुण्डलिनी Shakti Paramam Samudarutam Rupam Binduriti Gyayam Rupatitam Niranjanam Inde Mukta Pare Mukta Rupe Mukta Varaname Rupatite Tuye Mukta Te Mukta Natra Samshaya Swayam Sarva Mayo Bhutva Param Davam Vilokaye Sarvametan Niralayam Tasya Valokanam Prapya Savasanga Vivarjita Ekakineshvara Shantas Ishtate Ta Prasadata Ladam Va Tanaladam Va Svabhata Baulam Chata Nishkamineva Bhoktavyam Sada Santushtate Chasa Sarvagnya Paramityar Dehi Sarvam Mayo Buddha Ramate Yatra Kutrachit Yatreva Tisate Sopi Sadesha Punya Vajanam Muktasya Lakshanam Devi Avagre Katitam Maya Upadesha Sukha Devi Guru Margena Muktira Guru Bhakti Satadhyana Sakalam Tava Kirtikam Anenaya Bhave Karyam Tavarame Mamate Kikakarmano Yanti Yanaena Vavarnavam Yani Tu Bhavaye Sarvam Karmanish Karma Yatkritam Vibhavenam Patate Shunate Yari Nikipata Praratavyam Tatsarvam Safalam Bhave Guru Gita Makam Devi Sudata Vammayoritam Bhava Vyari Vinashartam Swayameva Jape Sadam Guru Gita Akshare Kamtu Mantra Rajami Manjape Anye Chavi Vira Mantra Alam Naranti Sorashi Ananta Phalamamnuti Guru Gita Japenatu Sarva Papa Prashamanam Sarva Daridya Nashanam Kalam Mrityu Bhayaharam Sarva Bhayapaham Mahavyari Aram Sarvam Vibhuti Siridam Bhave Atavamo Anavasham Swayameva Jape Sadam Ashtrasane Chadaridram Ashane Roga Sambhava Nirinyam Dukam Apnoti Ashte Bhavati Nishvalam Krishna Jinayana Siddhir Moksha Siddhyagra Charmani Kushasane Yana Siddhi Sarva Sirustu Kambale Kusheva Durvaya Devi Asane Shubra Kambale Upavishatato Devi Tape Degra Kamanasa Eyam Shuklam Sasanyartam Vashiratasanam Priye Avichare Krishna Varnan Pitta Varnam Danagame Uttare Shanti Kamastu Vashe Purvam Kojape Dakshine Maranam Proktam Paschime Chadanagama Mohanam Sarvabhutanam Mandamokshakaram Bhave Priyakaram Sarvaloka Vashambhave Sarvesham Stamanakaram Gunanam Chavivardhanam Dushkarmanashanam Cheva Sukarma siddham bhavet. Asidam sadaye karyam navagramayapam. Dusvapnanashanam cheva susvapna phaladayakam. Sarvashanti kanam nityam tatavadyasa pucharam. Avedavyam karam shrinam Saubhagyadayakam saram. Ayurarogamishvarya Akamata Shrivirava Tapamoksham avapnuyat. Avedavyam sakamata labate chanya janmani. Sarva dukkam vayam vignam Nashaye chapaharakam. Sarva bada prashamanam dharmata kama moksharam. Yam yam chintayate kamam tam tam prapnoti nishitam. Kamitasya kamadenu kalpana kalpaparapa. Shintamani shintitasya sarvamangala-karakam. Moksha hetur jape nityam moksha shriyam avapnuyat. Bhoga kamo jape dyove tasya kama phalapradam. Apechasta sasurascha dhanapadyasna vaishnava. Shevascha siriram devi satyam satyam na samshayam. Atakamya japestanam kattayami varanane. Sagare vasartire attavari aralaye. Shakti devalaye goste sarva devalaye shubhe. Vache dadatri muleva mate vrindavane tata. Kavitri nirmale stane nityanushtana chopiva. Nirvedane namorena tapamitam samachare. Smashane vaya bhumochu vantamulantike tata. Siddhyanti dotare mule chutta vriksha sasaniro. Guruputra varamurtas tasya siddhyanti nanyata. Shubha karmani sarvani diksha vrata tapamsi cha. Samsara malana shartam bhavapashani vrittaye. Guru Gitam vasi snanam tadvadya kurute sada. Saeva cha guru sakshat sadasa brahma vittamam. Tasya sthanani sarvani pavitrani na samshaya. Sarva shuddha pavitrosa swabhavad yatra tishtati. Tatra deva gana sarve chaitre pite vasanti. Asanasta shayano va vansansi samvaranapi. Ashvarudo gajaruda sutto va jagratopi va. Jisma satsaradyane guru gita japena tu. Tasya darshana matrena punarjamana vidyate. Samudre chayatatoyam shire kshiram grite gritam. Vile kumbe yatakashas tatama paramatmani. Tate badyani jivama paramamani liyate. Aikyena ramate yani yatra tatra divanisham. Evam vido mahamukta sarvara vartate buddha. Tasya sarva prayanena bhava bhaktim karoti ya. Sarva sandeha वरानने एको देवा एक धर्म एक निष्ठा परं तपः गुरुपरतरं नान्यत् नास्ति तद्वं गुरुपरम् माता धन्य पिता धन्यो धन्यो वत्साकुलं तथा धन्या च वसुरा देवी गुरुभक्ति सुदुर्लभा शरीरमेन्द्रियं प्राणाश्च षड् स्वजनबन्धवः माता पिता कुलं देवी गुरुरेव न संशयः आकल्पा च मनाकोत्या जपव्रता तपाक्रिया तत्सर्वं सफलं देवी गुरुसन्तोषमात्र च विद्यातापो बलेनेव मन्दभाग्याश्च ये नरः गुरुसेवां न कुर्वन्ति सत्यं सत्यं वरानने विष्णु महेशाश्च देवर्षि पितृकिन्नरः सदाचारान् यक्षाश्च अनेपि मुनयो जनाः गुरुभाव परं तीर्थम् अन्यतीर्थं निरर्थकम् सर्वतीर्थाश्रयो देवी पारं गुष्ठं च वर्तते जपेन जयमानोति क्षणतफलमाप्नुयात् हीन कर्माद्यजं सर्वान् स्थानानि च कर्माणि च जपमेन सनं कुर्वान् हीन कर्मफलप्रदम् गुरुगीतां प्रयाणेव सङ्ग्रामेरुपसङ्कते जपञ्जयमवाप्नोति मारणे मुक्तिरायकम् सर्वकर्म च सर्वत्र गुरुपुत्रस्य सिद्ध्यति इदं नास्य नो वाचं तावग्रे कथितं मया सुगोप्यं च प्रयाणेन ममं त्वं च प्रियत्विति स्वामी मुख्य गणेशादि विष्णुवरिणं च पार्वती मनसात्मेन वक्तव्यं सत्यं सत्यं वदाम्यहम् अतीव भगवचिताय श्रद्धभक्तियुताय च प्रवक्तव्यमिदं देवी मम मनसि सदा प्रिये मनसात्मेन वक्तव्या गुरुगीता कराचना संसार सागर समुद्रानेकमन्त्रम् ब्रह्मादिदेवमुनि पूजितस्य मन्त्रम् दारिद्र्य दुःख भवरोग विनाशमन्त्रम् वन्दे महाभयं गुरुराजमन्त्रम् इति श्रीस्कन्दपुराणे उत्तरकाण्डेश्वर पार्वती संवादे गुरुगीता समाप्ता श्री गुरुदेव चरणार्पणमस्तु नित्यानन्दाय गुरवे शिष्य संसारहरिणे भक्तकाये कदेहाय नमस्ते चित्सदात्मने निर्वासनं निराकाङ्क्षां सावदोषाविवर्जितं निरालम्बं निराकान्तं नित्यानन्दं नमाम्यहम् निर्ममं निराकारं समलोष्टाश्मकञ्चनं समदुःखसुखमधीरम् अवधूतं नमाम्यहम् अविनाशीरमम्मानम् एकविघ्नाय तद्वचा वितरागभयक्रोधं नित्यानन्दं नमाम्यहम् नामदेवो न मे देवो जीवो नाहमहमि चेत् एवं विघ्नाय सन्तुष्टम् अवधूतं नमाम्यहम् varjitam eyo pare ainam tam avadutam namamyam swabhaveneva yo yogi sukham bhogam na vanchati yadrishtalava santushtam nityanandamamyam nevaninda prasansavyam yasya vikriyate manam atma kviram atmanam avadutam namamyam nityam jagradavastayam Bhavnavadyovatishtate Nishchitam chinmayanmanam Nityanandam namamyam Dvesham nasti priyam nasti Nasti asya shubhashubham Teradhyana viram tam Avadutam namamyam Param pashati no yastu Jagapashanti chinmayam Nitya yuktam gunatitam Nityanandam namamyam Yohi darshanam atrena Bhavate bhuvanatrayam Pavanam jagamam tirtam Avadutam namamyam Sarva pujyam sarapurnam Akhandananda vigram Vaprakasham chiranandam Nityanandam namamyam Nishkalam nishkriyam shantam Nirmalam paramamritam Ganesha purivasinam Avadutam namamyam Yoga purnam tapomurtim Prema purnam sudarshanam Jnana purnam kripamurtim Nityanandam namamyam Durjana sajjano bhuyat Sajjana shanti matniyat Shanto muche tabandebhyo Mukta shanyan vimochaye Swasti prajavya paripalayantam Yayena marge namayi maisha O Brahmanemya Shubhamastu Nityam Lokha samasta Sukhino bhavantu Ale varshatu parajanya Prithvi shashasalini Deshoyam shuvaraito Brahmana santu nirbhaya Sarve bhavantu sukhina Sarve santu niramaya Sarve bhadrani pashyantu Ma kashi dukha bhag bhave Sarva sarat durgani Sarvo bhadrani pashyatu Sarva kamanavamnotu Sarva sabhatra nandatu Swasti matra uta Tichayeno astu Swasti gobhyo jagate purushevya Vishvam sabhutam suviratram noastu Joge vadrushe masuryam Om Shanti 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 Arati karum sada Guru ki karum sada Guru ki pyare Guru varaki Arati karum Guru varaki Arati karum Sadgurunath Maharaj ki jai.
Good morning. A pleasure always being here, as always, especially when it's about studying. It's such a pleasure. But before I start, let's invoke the Guru's glory, which is here anyway, but to make it present in our hearts and minds so we can make the most of this that we are going to study today. So the usual mantras, Nityanandaya Gurave Shirya Samsara Harine Bhaktakarye Kadehaya Namaste Chitsaranmane Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Sachidananda Murtaye Nisprapanchaya Shantaya Niralambaya Tejase Om Sahana Bhavatu No Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahe Techasvinavaditamastu Ma Vivishavahe Om Shanti 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 Sadgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai. We start in the year 2022, and I call this, to give it a name, the year of the yoga of knowledge, because this is what we're going to study now with Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And was remembering that we started the study groups for some time now, and every time we begin to study one of these books, it's like opening a chest, a treasure chest, and see what we're going to find, and it's so exciting. And at the end, when you think, okay, what have I got from this book for myself? There is so much. So I remember we've done some really difficult ones, really, like the Nectar of Discourses. That was one whole year of studying. The commentaries on it's a book like this, like a brick, huge. And it's commentaries only on the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So how somebody can think and know and share so much about one of the chapters is wonderful. And that is in Spanish also, translated. And it was another year important with the Bhagavad Gita, of course, one whole year there. And the sense of time, the sense that binds us, because what binds us is the limitation of time and space. So I remember after having read the Bhagavad Gita, we were sharing with the people in the study group, what did we get from this chapter? And they said, everything is already happened, everything is happening now, and there is nothing that will happen in the future. And this is very esoteric, apparently, but it breaks sometimes that limitation of time that we have. So when Arjuna says, I don't want to kill my teachers, I don't want to attack my gurus, my uncles, my family, I would rather not fight. And then Krishna laughs, no, Arjuna, what's your problem? They are already dead. You are a mere instrument. So it is mysterious. It is not so easy to get it the first time. But when you contemplate all of this, that time and space is relative, then my opinion is that we open the mind to absorb more of the truth. Because all the truth cannot be absorbed by the little mind, because it is limited. It's said by the sages, the stories on St. Augustine, when he saw that child crying on the beach, and asked him, what is your problem, child? Why are you crying? And the child says, in that little bucket, I want to bring the ocean home to play with it, but I don't know how to do it. And always St. Augustine also laughed. Child, how can you expect to put all that water in this little bucket? And it is said that the child laughed also at him and told him, this is exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to understand God with that little mind of yours. It will never happen. You have to step out. You have to step aside of the mind. So I find that studying these books, that's what they do. We studied another year, another that was not very easy, the Ashtavakra Gita. That took a lot of studying. And at the end, I remember that I started signing my emails to people that I can do it with, not to Office Depot, but to friends. Swama Himnaha, because there is a whole chapter in the Ashtavakra Gita that he repeats this again and again, Swama Himnaha, which means in my own glory. So I would say, very nice to have seen you, Bharava. In my own glory, Nityeshwari. And I thought, let me do it, see if I feel that it's true, see if it resonates with me, and it does still. So my feeling when I knew that we were studying again the Patanjali Yoga Sutra is that we had already read it, and I don't think there's many people who have not at least heard about it, or studied it, or memorized it, or tried to learn the sutras by heart, because it's the most popular book of all. There's no doubt about it, because everybody who wants to be a Hatha Yoga teacher, that is what they study. And the Iyengar system of yoga, and so many other schools, everybody reads the Yoga Sutras. So, but what is inside those books? That you keep reading them, and every time you get something else. And there's something else I'd like to say about this book, because it has 4 chapters. So the 4 chapters have different names, of course, the different sutras, we could say. And I was talking to my friend who teaches Iyengar school system of yoga, and she told me, it is very interesting that everybody studies chapter 1 and chapter 2. When they get to chapter 3, usually they stop, or they find an excuse, I have too much work, and never get into chapter 4. Because chapter 1 is samadhi. In samadhi, we would have a room here for a question. Why is samadhi the first chapter of the Yoga Sutra? Because in everything else that we study, samadhi is the end, is the goal, is when we are supposed to disappear and become one with that reality at the end of so much studying, of so much practice, of so much tapasya and everything. So, but here, Patanjali begins with samadhi. So what he says is this: true sadhana begins at samadhi. Before that, you're just like a sports person who is practicing to go to the Olympics. They run, they change their diet, they get a good teacher, and they learn, all the tricks, but they're not going to be somebody until they reach that height, that mountain, that Kailas of the Olympics, right? So we have to know that how to reach samadhi before even starting our sadhana. That's a revolutionary concept that Patanjali has here in the first chapter. So then there's the second chapter. Second chapter, we're going to see it is called sadhana. This is another word that we know very well, practice. And so he teaches all the ways that we can practice, all the tools that we are given in this book to awaken all that power and use it for that, to attain the strength to step aside so that we are that, so that we remember that we are that. There is a question that somebody asked a student of Patanjali, and he says, how many enlightened people have you met? How many enlightened people have you met? And then the student said, I don't know anybody. You will never meet anybody enlightened. That such a thing doesn't exist. What you have to see is the Shakti. It is the divinity that is there. Once the person has gathered enough energy to move aside, to move with his ego or her ego aside, to disappear. And then what remains is that Shakti in that form that apparently is a human being. But the human being knows that it's just using a vehicle to move around and work out the karmas. During the time that it takes him or her to realize that the karmas are in a subtle body, so in reality they don't exist. They exist because we think they exist. So these books are really like to wake us up at a very high level. And then the third chapter, is about supernatural powers. And it's very attractive at some point in your sadhana when you realize that you can live a life that is more open, more abundant, more beautiful than this. So they call that the supernatural powers, and it has exercises to do it. And there was a point when I studied another type of yoga, and their base was this, the supernatural powers. So it is very strange because it's called samyama. So you put your whole attention. This is a summary of the whole book. You put all your attention, your samyama, in several parts of the body, and you meditate on it, and you withdraw what you're seeing. It's these exercises that are on chapter 3, which is called Vibhuti, the third chapter of the Yoga Sutra. And so I was working for a chemical company when chemical was not a dirty word yet. And I was in the procurement, they call it, or purchasing department. And I realized after a few days that I knew who was calling and what they were calling from because I was answering phones. And I would tell my boss, so and that is calling and you haven't sent such and such. And then when I realized that, I thought, this is very wow, But it went away, fortunately. Baba always advises us against getting attached to those situations. But it works. And then the fourth chapter is called Illumination or Liberation, Kaivalya. And that is the end. That is where it explains everything, how we have to disappear. So it's natural that students normally, they do chapter 1, chapter 2, and then they stop. The plan here, for me, I think, all the year has 12 months, and we give a talk every month. So if Gurudev is here for 4 months, there is 8 months, 8 talks. So to tackle, so to speak, 2 chapters every month, so that I have time to do chapter 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and give it equal time. It's a challenge, but I think it's important, since the book has 4 chapters, to see all of the 4 chapters, right? Not be afraid. So there's a wide variety of philosophies in Hinduism. And Hinduism is also a name that was given by the British, so it's Sanatan Dharma, really, but we call it Hinduism for convenience. And so there are 6 main philosophies in Hinduism, and there's one that is called Sankhya. I'm not going to get into the other 5 because it's not the subject of this book. But if somebody were to ask us, or simply we ask, what are we studying this with Patanjali Yoga Sutra? Is it Vedanta? Is it Kashmir Shaivism? What is it? So it's neither of those. It's called Sankhya philosophy. So when we know that we're studying Sankhya, the word sounds familiar. Sankhya means enumeration. So when you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, counting, observation, deduction by observation too, like if you're studying something and you come to a conclusion, that is also a Sankhya. Proof of something that you say, okay, if you tell me that I mix oxygen with hydrogen, do I get water? Prove it to me, that proof in the pudding, so to speak, Sankhya. So it belongs naturally to the area of the buddhi, of the intellect. This is not to do a lot with bhakti, with devotion. It has a little bit to do with it, but not too much. And therefore, it falls in the category that they call Raja Yoga, which is the Raja of the intellect, the yoga of the mind. Interestingly enough, when we saw the intensive with Gurudev, he found a relation between the Yoga Sutra, the Sankhya philosophy, and the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya Yoga is the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So this was very witty. Out of the 18th chapter, this is the 2nd one, and it has to do with enumerating all the things that one has to do in order to clean the mind, to make it work better, and at the end, to dissolve it in the self. So 2nd chapter called Sankhya Yoga. And there is a summary here, it's very brief, that says, in chapter 2, Arjuna accepts the position as a disciple of Lord Krishna, and taking complete of him, requests the Lord to instruct him on how to dispel his lamentations and grief. So this is when, after Krishna explains something in the 1st chapter, Arjuna gets it, that he needs Krishna's help not only as a charioteer, but also as a guru. He used to be his friend. Imagine that, like somebody's my friend, and suddenly I realize he's my guru. Wow, big surprise. So in the second chapter, he accepts that he needs the instruction from the Lord and says, this chapter is often deemed as a summary to the entire Bhagavad Gita because it's enumerating this, you have to do that. So many subjects are explained here, such as Karma Yoga, which is the yoga of action, Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, Buddha Yogi, and the Atma, which is the soul. Predominance has been given to the immortal nature of the soul existing within all living entities, and it has been described in great detail. So is long, it's more than 70 verses. It's long, chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. Thus this chapter is entitled, The Eternal Reality of the Soul in Mortality. This is the ISKCON gave this name, but Sankhya Yoga does not mean this. This is how they interpret it. Okay. So Gurudev spoke about this chapter, verse 48 and 50, and I'm going to go just into the first one, which is verse 48, which is called Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. He kept repeating during his talk. See if we get it. Equanimity is yoga. So now, the structure of the Yoga Sutra, as I said, is 4 chapters, and by analyzing the separation or the differences between the spirit and the body, that is how we get to understanding and practicing what Patanjali is teaching there. There is something interesting that maybe you're asking yourselves. Why is she saying Yoga Sutra? Why not Yoga Sutras? Well, the thing is that sutra is like a necklace, and in the necklace there's many beads. And in ancient times, people used to learn by memorizing, because they didn't know how to read or write. They memorized the phrases from the teacher, memorized everything. So they tried to use as few words as possible, and that is called a vakya, or a bead. So sometimes the most important one, or the initial one here in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, is only 3 words. Then these vakyas are like the beads, and the whole thing is like a suture. You know, a suture like a surgeon uses a thread, the same root suture, sutra. So sutra is the thread, and the beams are called vakya. So many vakyas here. Or we can choose to say that each one of the chapters is in itself a sutra, right? But it's not, because in all books that are not adapted to the Western thought, it says the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali. So it's singular. This is just in case, because when we're studying, I always like it to make clear in whatever I discover in my research, share it. Now we have Patanjali. Patanjali probably didn't even exist, because the range of centuries go from one possible date of birth of his to another. Sometimes it's like 300, 400 years. So we don't know exactly what there. And there is several cases like this. People who have written other works, and then they say there's 21 or 28 with the same name, and they name that a family or a last name or many things. So if somebody asks you, but what time is Patanjali? He begins to what century? It's like a 9th century. We don't know anything. And we don't know also if he is corresponding to 3 different people, because one was a grammarian, so he studied Sanskrit and probably other Indian languages, and so he wrote a lot of grammar to help people to purify their speech. So that is one. There's another Patanjali that was a doctor, Vaidya. So he taught the secrets or the basis of Ayurveda. So that's another one. And then the one who wrote the Yoga Sutra. So that can be probably 3 or more. I think this thing is important to know when we start to study something, so we situate ourselves in the time, if possible, and the space. And this yoga that he taught is called many things. One of the things is called Ashtanga Yoga, which is the 8 limb yoga. Most Hatha yoga practitioners and teachers, they use Ashtanga yoga. And when we start talking about Patanjali, there is an invocation, like we always do when we do the Devi chants or the Vishnu Sahasranam, etc., to invoke that energy. So there is one that I found, because I was curious if he had his own invocation. And there is. And I looked, I combed the internet finding this, and it's always the same melody. So this must be the official invocation for Patanjali. Iyengar yoga and other yogas, everybody chants the same one with the same melody. And the meaning of this is, let us bow before the noblest of sages, Patanjali, who gave yoga for serenity and sanctity of mind. So here's the Yoga Sutra. Grammar for clarity and purity of speech, and medicine for perfection of health. Let us prostrate before Patanjali, incarnation of Adisesha, which is a serpent, sacred serpent, whose upper body has a human form. He's represented with this part as a human form. Arms hold a conch and a disc, with each hand has a conch and a disc. And then who is crowned by a 1,000-headed cobra. So he has the cobra. The lower part of the body is the body of the cobra. You must have seen that. It's otherwise Wikipedia it. It's very interesting. And more or less like that. He says, Yogena chitasya padena vacham malam charirasya chavaidhyakena yopakarotam pravaran muhinam patanjalim pranarinatavasmi avahu parashakaram shankachakrasidharinam sahasrasirsham shwetam paramami patanjalim. Om. So this is the invocation. Now this book has many particularities, and one of those is that it starts with an invitation to learn the basics of the Yoga Sutra. In the Shiva Sutras, for example, the first sutra is Chaitanya Atma, so the self is the individual. Then it gives you the whole summary in the first sutra. Pratyavinya does the same, and many other books. So in this case, it starts by saying that we are going to listen to what in reality is the basis and the content of the sutra. So it begins with the word ata. Ata, which means now. Now we are going to hear the teaching about the sutra. And I could say that just the word ata is extremely important, because that is the start to study the Yoga Sutra. For example, going back to the examples of sports, a full start can do away with an athlete's life, sport life. You know that when you're starting to run, to start in a race, so he or she puts the feet in several stops here, so that they can all start at the same time. Same thing when they're going to go diving in the water, they have to be well seated or well standing or whatever. It has to be a perfect posture, total concentration. The whole stadium was totally quiet, and then they do it. When there is a false start and they have to start again, I have heard it said many times, you never gather the same Shakti. They call it the same power. Why? Because you probably have been for 4 years, 8 years, practicing every day, dreaming of this opportunity, and then you have a false start and it doesn't happen. So I think that Patanjali here says ata, antes, before, is beginning to teach, because this false start is very bad. And then I would say that the title of this talk is Navigation Settings from Patanjali Yoga Sutras to Reach the Destination. And I would say that this would bring the dreaded message that we get on the GPS sometimes, estimated time in traffic, 11 minutes. So if we were to set the GPS to practice Patanjali Yoga Sutras to reach the destination, then it would tell us probably estimated time of arrival, whatever you want. It can be right now if you realize already that you are that. It can be you have to know where are you going to go. Or it can be for lifetimes. You decide. You decide the route. No? So when I hear this about the false start, what happens is estimated time in traffic can be a lot. And then I also thought, well, we're doing our New Year's resolutions at the beginning of the year, and he talks a lot about vrittis, which are like fluctuations of the mind, not necessarily thoughts, but movements of the mind. It can be emotions, it can be anything that keeps the mind in a state of unrest. So I was thinking maybe to start a diet of vrittis and reduce the intake, or not feeding them so much attention, because the vrittis will always be there, but if we feed them, if we go, oh my God, I'm so worried. Yes, I'm worried. Oh yeah, I read in the newspaper, and then you get together with everybody to discuss the same thing, and then it's like gluttony. Therefore, he gives us the techniques to attenuate all of this, and they call it kleshas. We're going to study that next time. It's very, very complete and complex as well. Then there is the way he presents all these teachings. It's interesting because he's a teacher. Definitely, he knows how to teach. He has the technique and everything. So the first one, as we were saying, that the first chapter is called Samadhi. So it begins by saying, now, Ata means now, yoga means process of yoking or union, but yoga also means totality, so become one. The mind, the soul, and the heart, and the self. And then Anushasanam. Then 1-2, which is the second verse of the first Vakya, it says, yoga is to still the patterning of consciousness. It says this translator, but it's actually the fluctuations of the mind. Now, how to stop them? How he says it is to stop paying so much attention to those fluctuations, because they're there anyway, and to try to stop them only takes a lot of energy, and it doesn't happen for a long time. They disappear or they subside, and then they come, and sometimes even stronger. The very well-known third verse is the one that says then meaning when the mind is attenuated or is calm, pure awareness can abide in its very true nature, and it calls that the seer. So in that case, we are the seer. We are the ones that are practicing this. So we see it, and we rest, abide, avastanam, in our own essence of identity. It's just like that. But how to do it? That is in chapter 3. And then 1.4 says, otherwise, awareness takes itself to be the patterns of consciousness. So what is he's saying, there are only like two kinds of medicines here. One is bitter and one is sweet, you could say. You can, as is 1.3, you rest in the unmoving mind, and then there the natural bliss arises. Or otherwise, that consciousness forgets that it's consciousness and identifies itself with this body, with this reality, with this limited individual. In other words, we have to always be choosing between identifying ourselves with consciousness or identifying ourselves with the individual. And every time we identify with the individual, then what naturally springs forth are two of the main kleshas, or problems there, obstacles in the traffic, we could say. And those two, it's important to be watching all the time when they come, raga and dvesha. So it's attraction and rejection. when something attracts us or we are attracted to something, that in itself contains a world of obstacles. Some people say that the Hindu philosophies are pessimistic because they don't talk about happiness. They don't talk about happiness because they talk about the highest one, which is called Ananda, the supreme bliss. So happiness is not considered in most of the works of the Indian philosophies because it's a minor type of feeling, it's a minor type of joy. We can get happy, like maybe we find out what is for lunch today. Oh, I love it, that's happy. But the highest type, the supreme bliss, that is what is talked about in the scriptures. So there are two types of bliss. One that is caused by something, and then what is coming from within. And what is said, not in this particular scripture, but in all the others, is that when we seem to find happiness or unhappiness, the final result of both is unhappiness. Sounds horrible, but that's what, it has a logical ending here. Because what they say, when you're happy because of something, because of somebody, because of a situation, because of anything, you're happy for that time, but in itself, it contains the seed of unhappiness because it's going to end. Because the only thing that satisfies the heart is that which is eternal, Satchit Ananda. So when they say you have something, a new car, a new boyfriend, a new child, a new house, whatever will make you happy. And then it says, sooner or later, if nothing happens to that object, you will die. So you will be separated from that object. But the object can die, can be broken, can be scratched. We know everything that can happen to the objects of attraction. So in that second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita says something that in the beginning is hard to understand, when it says, if you find yourself that your enterprise or whatever task that you are set out to do meets with success, don't be extremely happy. Don't be extremely delighted. Just take it as, okay, good. It was good. It's not how we're taught to be, but if one practices, then you see that really the seed of suffering has less of a chance to sprout. Because then the expectation is less, and expectation is part of all these problems. So Patanjali, what he says is that pure awareness can abide in its very true nature and be with equanimity. Otherwise, awareness takes itself to identify itself with this body. And we know that this is what causes all troubles and all pain. So that is 1:4. Then it says, there are 5 types of patterns, including both hurtful and benign. There are 4 types of feelings, of experiences, that include both hurtful and benign. So what he says, they're called klishta, which hurts, and aklishta, which doesn't hurt or is benign. But he calls none of these pleasant. And then he says, there are right perception, misperception, conceptualization, deep sleep, and remembering. So this is what happens, how we can perceive the world in a wrong way. This is somebody, I think, that is not taking minor disciples. Like, I think when you start studying this, you really have to try to see, okay, is this what I want to do? Is this how I want to fix my misconceptions, my misrepresentations, and my misconceptualizations? Because otherwise I'm living in the same like a hamster, doing new resolutions and wishing to be a better person and wishing to change the world and, not to use plastic. Little like band-aids on the cancer of worldliness. I read this book and it really impacted me so strongly. It's not a question of seeing whether this is easy or not. It's just wanting to do it. Then the question of whether it's easy or not is secondary. So it says here, right perception, pramana. Pramana, what happens is that when we are identifying body with this individual, and we identify the rest of things that are outside, we naturally see from these eyes, with these glasses, with this perception, the other thing that is outside. There's no way to change it. I think it was Albert Einstein who said something important. He said, doing the same thing every day and expecting a different result is insanity. He said it like this: if you keep on doing the same, and hoping, praying that maybe one day, is insanity. So pramana, the right perception, has to come from the self. And how do we do this? At the end of this talk, I'll tell you something that I found, an exercise to probably correct the right perception at all times. Then there's another called misperception or error. When you think something because somebody has told you, and then you follow that, logically the result is going to be another error, because doing the same thing every day and expecting a different result is insanity. So we have to see from which point am I seeing this thing? How am I understanding it? How am I believing it? Do I believe in this? It takes some courage sometimes to contemplate what we believe and put it on a table to analyze if really it is true for me. After 10 years, after 15 years, have I changed my perception? Is this like impossible for it to be true, but I believe it because I was told when I was a child, etc. So there are right perception, misperception, then conceptualization, vikalpa. So vikalpa is the process of thinking that takes the 4 parts of the mind and creates something. The typical example is that I'm walking in a field and I see a dog like this big and black, probably, or maybe not, brown. And then my manas, or the first part of my perceptive apparatus, which is the mind, thinks, thing. The buddhi, what is it? It is a dog. And then quickly going back to the past, to past experiences, and it says, dogs bite. And then if the dog was, then you think it is, then it's ahankara, the ego. What does this have to do with me? It happens in a split second or less. But it's that the mana sees the thing, buddhi interprets it for me, and ahankara, or the ego, says, what does that have to do with me? How am I going to relate to this new experience or all experience? The thing is that we're not living in the present ever, so we react according to what happened in the past. So we're giving past answers to present questions. This is some of the things that I've read about this exercise. And I think it's true. We think that everything is going to have the same responses as before, but everything is always changing. There may be that dog doesn't bite, to put an example. Then he says the other perception is nidra, sleep. So when we're sleeping, obviously the perception is not clear. It's just our mind that is acting and reacting and playing with memories and God knows how many things. And then people want to interpret it, but it's impossible. It's just our own mind. Like I have a friend who used to interpret dreams, and somebody came and asked her, what does this mean? And he says, what does it mean to you? How am I going to tell you? It's your mind, So we start seeing the mind in a new light by reading this chapter, because we see that it's a machine, and that we can really begin to use it in a different way, just by realizing what it really is. And the last one of these 5 is called memory or remembering. And this is really living in the past. When we learn something, like we learn this is a flat piece of wood, with 4 pillars to sustain it, which we call legs, but they're not legs, they're just more pieces of wood. And then the mind fabricates that it is a table. And everywhere where we find something like that, you say table, table, and that's how we learn. But to unlearn what we recommend here, we have to withdraw name and form from that object. That is very clearly explained in chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called Vibhuti-pada. And I'm not going to go into extraordinary powers now, but there is an exercise here that I used to practice because I learned it in a course that I took that is called Course in Miracles. I thought they would teach you to do miracles, but they don't. But I went there anyway because I'm curious. Concentration locks consciousness in a single area. So he's explaining here on chapter 3, verse 1. The concentration, or certainly focus, locks consciousness on a single area. Then it says, in meditative absorption, but this can be and must be done with open eyes, the entire perceptual flow is aligned with that object. So we can meditate on whatever, on the microphone. You just see it, remove your knowledge of the name and form. It's not difficult, it's just a little practice. So you don't call it anymore a microphone, and you don't see it as a microphone, you just see reality. The reality as it is, which is being enlightened. Enlightened people see reality. They don't superimpose their reality as seen by the individual limited person. So it says here, and here he's thinking that we already studied chapters 1 and 2. In meditative absorption, the entire perceptual flow is aligned with that object. Your perception is aligned with that object, and you only see it as what it is. What it is, not what you learned that it was. Not how we would like it to be, not how we think it should be, not how we fear it might be, what is. And then, verse 3 of chapter 3, which is the one that follows, he says, when only the essential nature of the object shines forth, only the essential nature of us is the divine self. The essential nature of any rock is the divine self. The essential nature of a window is the divine self. When we withdraw name and form, then we see reality as it is. Why? Because in Kashmir Shaivism, what it is said is the self, or Shiva, whatever you call it, in creating the world, the universes, then it gives it a name and form. Name and form perish. When we think of these things, okay, anything that has a name and form will perish. Therefore, anything that has a name and form cannot be an object of my attraction or rejection, cannot be the object of my raga or dvesha. It's like, it's easy, it's just that usually we don't speak like this. So it says, when only the essential nature of the object shines forth, as if formless. So we, no raga, no name, no form, no nama rupa. Integration has arisen. So the integration is samadhi. Samadhi is another word for integration. You integrate yourself to that reality. You are one with it, you are it. No one with it. We don't become anything, we just are. That explanation is given differently in one of the sections in Secret of the Siddhas. It is very impressive. Then, the fourth verse of this, it says concentration, meditative absorption, and integration. So these 3 things that we already saw. Regarding a single object, and doesn't matter what object, the object can be a thought. It's a subtle object. It can be an opinion, it can be an emotion, or it can be something solid that we call solid. So integration regarding a single object comprises the perfect discipline of consciousness. So what he's saying here, we are consciousness. There's no way we can be anything else but consciousness, because consciousness is the force and the material by which the world is created. Shankaracharya was recommended to ask this question of what material is the world constructed? What is used to build this world? Consciousness, nothing else. So we are consciousness, and we are existence because we are existing is very simple. So the way they explain it is always try to be aware of being existence, of being eternal, of being true, of being supreme bliss. Because it takes the same amount of effort to believe the other. Like he said, otherwise, consciousness is identified with this limited form. It's more and more, like I would say, what they call a tipping point. So the tipping point is like, I'm on this, a Mexican woman, I'm trying so hard to be a good person, I'm trying so hard to be enlightened, and I practice and I chant every day, and I do myself, okay. That conversation is the limited self, is the individual that is trying hard. But the Guru comes and tells you that Tuam Asi. Or if he speaks English, he says, you are that. And then Gurudev always says it's like a tug of war between the disciple and the Guru, because when he says, no, I think I need a second opinion. This is how he says it. Very funny. So he says, it's so easy, but we don't want to do it really, because it would mean to divorce ourselves from everything we've learned before, not only in this lifetime, in previous lifetimes. And we are attached to it. Sometimes things can make you suffer, but the attachment is hard to break until what he says here, concentration, meditative absorption. So you see something and like you're doing nothing, okay? Waiting, that loudspeaker. And you withdraw, name and form, nama rupa, they're not there. It's not what I think it is, and it's not called a loudspeaker, it's just seeing pure reality. Integration regarding a single object comprise the perfect discipline of consciousness. This is a practical exercise. It has to be understood, but in my view, I may not be correct, of course, it's not so much understanding it, it's doing it, practicing, practicing, practicing. Then comes number 5, which is, once the perfect discipline of consciousness is mastered, wisdom dawns. So he says, Jayat, no? Perfect discipline. Once the perfect discipline of consciousness, so once we make ourselves practitioners or doing this every day, sometimes for 15 minutes, sometimes for 1 minute, every time we remember, and then more and more and more, it's like, remember that story of the Greek, don't remember who that is, who wanted to discover what was the weight of the volume freed by putting an object in a tub with water. Euclides? Archimedes. So he wanted to find out, but he was thinking, like, how can I put a scale inside the water? It's just not going to work because the weight of the water, and he gave it a lot of thought. Like you have to give a lot of thought for all these things. And then one day he decided to take a bath, right? And he gets in the bathtub. And then water is splashed out of the bathtub because there's no sufficient space for the body of Archimedes and the water as it was. So he said, okay, you measure how much water was released by my presence, by my weight, and then you know the weight of this. And then the formulas to calculate all these very important things. So there is no space, this is how I understand it, there is no space for the limited self, for the limited person, and also the realized consciousness that is there shining through or in spite of the limited this. This is what he is saying, concentration, meditative absorption, and integration samadhi. Samadhi has a lot of meanings. Comprise the perfect discipline of consciousness. So we act as if we start walking as if I'm yet enlightened. Why wait? Is it a waiting game? It is, You fall in love with that, no? Like when I was in Catholic Church, I'm such a sinner. I mean, sinful, you're born in sin, the original sin. And then you have to be like released or saved or rescued from that which you didn't cause. And then they give you how to do it. But you always do something that is sinful, so there's no way. It's just like a mud that you keep going on and on and on and deeper every time, thinking less of yourself. And then you go to visit Bhamuktananda, like it happened to so many people. And he says, no, you are perfect. And in that Shakti, in that power of somebody who really knows it, it gives it to you. You don't have to understand, you don't have to study, nothing. We study here for another reason that I will say at the end. It's not necessary to study. You have the guru. All these people who study this, they don't have a guru. They have to go do their own homework. But when you have it, he tells you what it is, and he gives you the experience, and you just have to then stabilize yourself in it. Like Gurudev was saying in this intensive, you just have to, equanimity, you just have to establish yourself, not go in and out and in and out. The mind loves it. The mind loves to suffer, to tell, no, how are you? Oh, don't even ask. No, I won't ask. Pretend I didn't ask. No. So he's saying here, once the perfect discipline of consciousness is mastered, wisdom dawns. Why? Because then we know our own true self. This is not so separated from Kashmir Shaivism. I spent some weeks analyzing how, because I love it so much, and I think the greatest book that exists is Secret of the Siddhas, how this could be, what is the relation? No? So number 6 says, perfect discipline is mastered in stages. Perfect discipline is mastered in stages. Stages, Bhumishu is like in the earth, no? And then it says, these 3 components, concentration, absorption, and integration, are more interiorized than the preceding 5. Obviously, the other is more external. But in all actuality, what I think is it doesn't matter because we just go and do it. This is somebody who sat down to think and do it for decades, I think. And then 8 says, even these 3 are external to integration that bears no seeds. Even these 3 that are very interiorized, yes, interiorized, are external to what really is being internalized. So it's like a fruit, no? The fruit has the seed, the skin, the flesh, you call it, and then the seed, and then what is inside the seed. So there are different levels of interiorization. It says, even these 3 are external to integration that bears no seeds, because there's 2 types of samadhi. Samadhi with seeds, which will again sprout and bring about the knowledge and the limitations and the actions and the problems. And there's another one, like when you're buying grapes or oranges, you want it with seeds or without seeds. So if he had seeds, it will sprout again, and if it's forever finished. And here I find, like I'm almost finishing now, something interesting, because when the seeds are burned in the fire of knowledge, in Sanskrit it's called sankhya. In Mexican, in Nahuatl, it's not in Spanish, when you burn something, whether on purpose or by accident, it's called sancochar. So I thought, wow, we speak Sanskrit without knowing. You burn them and they will never ever sprout again. So that's why this is the teaching. And here, I think, is where I should stop now. And I'm not saying, really, whether it's difficult or easy. But what I can say is when you read this type of books, and especially because the Guru's Shakti is in it, by recommending that we do it, then it gives the experience in different levels and intensities. And there is one whole chapter that talks about the intensity, where it's acute, and it's medium, and it's mediocre, and it's different types. But for now, maybe we want to try to see that what happens when we withdraw name and form from the object. And as I said, the object can be myself. The object can be an emotion, can be a thought, can be a perception, or can be a thing, what we call inert. So now, this is the exercise that I wanted to suggest. I would say, if you like to read the first chapter, and then think what of that talks to you, and what of that you would like to go deeper in it. And then the next talk is by Dana, so we can complete that first chapter with a combination of knowledge, of study, and experience. Make it a lot more fun, a lot more lively, than just trying to learn all the words and understand it on a mental level. Because understanding it, I think we understand it. We read this book at least 3 times in the course of years. But practice is important. The second chapter is called Practice, Sadhana. So he's saying, okay, I'm going to give you some information, and then you have to practice, and then see if that, what we consider limited in this perception of thinking that I am a limited individual, then whatever fantastic thing happens, we think that is out of the world, out of reality, that is wonderful, or a miracle. And perhaps this is the way we are all supposed to live 24 hours a day. So that's what I wanted to share, and then we'll see you very soon. Sagurunath Maharaj Ki Jai.
Nandana Gopala Devaki Devaki Nandana Gopala Devaki Nandana Gopala 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 Devaki Nandana Devaki Nandana Gopala Devaki Nandana Gopala Devaki Nandana Gopala Devaki Nandana Gopala Gopala, Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala, 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 Devaki Nandana Gopala. Devaki Nandana Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala. Devaki Nandana Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala. Devaki Nandana Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala, Devaki Gopala, Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala, Gopala. Gopala, Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala. Gopala, Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala. Gopala, Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala, Gopala. Oh, Gopala, Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala, 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 Devaki Nandana Gopala, 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 Devaki Nandana Gopala. Gopala, Gopala, Devaki Nandana Gopala. Devaki Nandana Gopala. Dhanya Dhanya Pradakshina Satguru Raya Chizale Twara Suravara Vimana Uttara Yachi Dhanya Dhanya Pradakshina Satguru Raya Chizale Twara Suravara Vimana Uttara Yachi. Punya झाले परसुरवर विमान उतरा याचे धन्य धन्य सद्गुरुरायाचे झाले परसुरवर विमान उतरा याचे दक्षिणा सद्गुरुरायाचे झाले परसुरवर विमान उतरायाचे धन्य धन्य दक्षिणा सद्गुरुरायाचे झाले परसुरवर विमान उतरायाचे प्रदक्षिणा करुणे देह पावे वाहिला प्रदक्षिणा करुणे देह पावे वाहिला प्रदक्षिणा करुणे देह पावे वाहिला प्रदक्षिणा करुणे देह ओ श्रीरंगात्मक विठ्ठल कुदे उभा राहिला धन्य धन्य परसुरवर विमान उतरायाचे धन्य धन्य प्रदक्षिणा सद्गुरुरायाचे परसुरवर विमान उतरायाचे धन्य धन्य प्रदक्षिणा सद्गुरुरायाचे परसुरवर विमुरायाचे धन्य धन्य प्रदक्षिणा ज्योत से ज्योत जगा गावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो मेरा अंदर मेरा मिटावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो हे योगेश्वर हे ज्ञानेश्वर हे योगेश्वर हे ज्ञानेश्वर हे सर्वेश्वर हे परमेश्वर हे सर्वेश्वर हे परमेश्वर निज कृपा बरसावो सद्गुरु ज्योत जगावो मेरा अंतर मेरा मिटावो सद्गुरु ज्योत जगावो हम बालक तेरे द्वार पे आए हम बालक तेरे द्वार पे आए मंगल दर सद्गुरु ज्योत जगावो मेरा अंतर मेरा मिटावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो शीश झुकाया करे तेरी आरती शीश झुकाया करे तेरी आरती प्रेम सुरा बरसावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो मेरा अंधारत मेरा मिटावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो अंतर में युग युग से सोए अंतर में युग युग से सोए चित्त शांति को जगावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो मेरा अंतरत मेरा मिटावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो साची ज्योत जगे हृदय में साची ज्योत जगे हृदय में सो अमनार जगावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो मेरा अंतरत मेरा मिटावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो जीवन मुक्तानंद विनाशी जीवन मुक्तानंद विनाशी शरण शरण लगावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो मेरा अंतरत मेरा मिटावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो मेरा अंतरत मेरा मिटावो सद्गुरु ज्योत से ज्योत जगावो त्वमेव माता च पिता त्वमेव त्वमेव बन्धु च सखा त्वमेव त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणां त्वमेव त्वमेव सर्वं मम देव देव दुराकरो दुःखदार सबा दया करो भगवान मना मंदिर में उज्ज्वल तेरा निर्मल ज्ञान Jesus chadiya apane vinta karunyanath namaskar kim vinta karun jod mein dono haath nama jod mein dono haath om purnamada purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnamevavashishyate om shanti 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 Sadgurunath Maharaj ki jai.
So this concludes our Sunday morning satsang and the introduction and the initiative on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And thank you, Nityeshwari, for an incredible, inspiring I had a couple of different analogies in my head. One was like setting up a table and then having the appetizer there, the entree, all of the different dishes, and the dessert, and it felt like we got the whole spectrum, the whole feeling and experience of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras just in the first offering today. So thank you very, very much. It was wonderful and very attractive, and can't wait for next week, Dana. Can't wait. And next week we have Dana, who will be continuing with the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And again, I think that invocation, I think we'll all try to learn it, the musicians, and every week on Sundays, we can all chant that one together. I think it'll be lovely as we go through 2022. So that was something that rang to my heart for sure. And an interesting perspective. I had no idea that there was that invocation there. And also, next week, just a reminder to everyone, it's not too late to register. On January 15th, next Saturday, Dana Wilkinson will be conducting the study group online via Zoom, and that's the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So we have several people who have subscribed in for that class, but you can still register, and if you go to the Shanti Mandir online website, you'll see the registration there. So definitely not to be missed. We're on a lovely roll and a lovely start, a lovely beginning with that. So I want to encourage everyone to join us, because right at the beginning of the year, it's lovely when Gurudev sets the subject, tells us exactly what we're going to be studying, and it gives us that GPS for the entire year. So, and as I've said many times, the wonderful thing about it is all of these talks are on YouTube. So like today, we want to go back, and we want to go back to Raga and Dvesha. We want to go back to Pramana. We want to go back to Samadhi. We want to go back to the 4 chapters. Whatever it is that we want to explore, or go back to and find the book, get the book, and start our own practice of it, our own reading of it, so that we can hear the talks, listen to the talks, but then go into the practical point of it and create a relationship to that scripture. So we have a wonderful one for 2022. So please, you can go online and find those books. I know they're rare. I know right now people are getting them from Canada. So don't give up. You will find a copy, but definitely try to bring that one to your home and bring that one to your own library. It's a wonderful interesting, mystical day out here at Shanti Mandir, Walden today. We've all woken up to some freezing rain, cold temperatures. So everybody is to walk very carefully, very mindful, and walk on the snow, not on the driveways themselves. That's much easier to walk on the snow areas, not on the driveways themselves. And I know that one beautiful prasad that came to my world and to my life for 2022 is, first of all, I have my nephew here from Satsang, at Satsang, and he graduated and he's now serving the US Coast Guard, and he could have been posted anywhere, and he's posted 2 hours and 15 minutes from Shanti Mandir Walden. So we look forward to having him and seeing him on a regular basis. Congratulations, Jack. And yeah, very happy to serve him while he's near, and do whatever we can to make sure that his mind is cleaned continuously, and may you receive all the wonderful teachings and practices of this tradition to help you do that on a daily basis. So with that, everybody's invited to come up for darshan, followed by lunch prasad, and continue to explore Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Sadhgurunad Maharaj Ki Jai.